test over 13 and 14. A test over 13 and 14 Fridays again. Tuesday, Thursday. Okay. So remember, the chapter 13 is about manifest destiny and all that kind of stuff. Remember that we have the Texan Revolution. Remember, Spain controlled Mexico, and then like 1820s, Spain gives Mexico its independence. There is a province inside of Mexico called Texas, and the Mexican government wanted to encourage more people to live there, so you had impresarios recruit Americans to come move to Texas, and the Americans who live in Texas will be called Tejanos. Okay? Eventually, though, there's a problem. Do you remember that ratio? How much the 3-to-1, okay? That the Americans or Tejanos will outnumber the Mexicans living in Texas 3-to-1. And remember, if you want to live in Texas, no slavery, you had to convert to Catholicism, you had to learn Spanish, remember all that? Well, now, since the Americans, Tejanos, outnumber, they're like, hey, shouldn't we, be able to have a say and stuff? And they didn't like that. So Santa Anna will become the dictator of Mexico. He does not like, all these Americans living in Texas, and he will invade Texas. Remember that? Yes? Okay. Also remember you have the Alamo, which there will be a massacre there. 12 days bombarding the Alamo in San Antonio. And then you have Goliad. These are two massacres that are going to really make the Mexicans look really bad to Americans. Because these were like, just, everyone at the Alamo died. And Goliad, you'll see, it was a massacre as well. Then you have the Battle of San Jacinto. It was like Jacinto, but Jacinto. And that is where Santa Anna will be captured. Remember that? And he is forced to sign a treaty that gives Texas independence. Okay. Now, here's where it is. So Texas gets its independence in 1836. And Sam Houston will be the first president. Okay. That same year, they request to do what to America? Or with America? What's that A word? Annexed. Because remember, it's the Republic of Texas, like their own country. And then 1836, the Texans request to be annexed, joined in America. Okay? Jackson is the president at the time. He says no. Because he didn't want to open up that can of worms about like slavery and stuff. There's a nice balance. Okay? So, they keep on going. Who was that guy who will become president because William Henry Harrison dies? Remember his accident? See, who's that guy? Tyler, this guy right here. Okay? Remember, he's all about, he wants to, there's the Webster-Ashburton Treaty, but he also wants to annex Texas, right? And are those Whigs going to support him? No, because he vetoed all their stuff. They're like, we're not going to support you. Okay? Well, what's going to happen is, in 1844, Polk is going to win. And Polk is all about expanding westward. And he's like, I'm going to annex Texas. Okay? It's kind of like, the 2016 election. We know that, like, when they announced that, Trump won the Electoral College majority, okay? People now, what they tend to do is they focus on what the president who's going to be inaugurated in the next year, they focus on his goals. And like Obama, it was kind of they almost viewed him as like a retired president, even though he was still the current president. You know what I'm talking about? So John Tyler wants to annex Texas, okay? But the Whigs aren't going to do it. Like, no, okay? But Polk wins the presidency, but the final days in his office in March of 1845, okay, he will hold what is called a joint session. Tyler does a joint session of Congress, okay? And instead of doing a treaty, okay, is that if you do with both houses of Congress, you only need a simple majority. And we're talking days before he is no longer president, and days before he is inaugurated. Congress will vote to annex Texas as a state. And if you think about it, did they do that to honor him? No. They did that because this guy said he's only going to serve 4 years. And he will. One term, 4 years. And the people wanted to go ahead and make it easier for this guy when he gets inaugurated. We already get Texas annexed. So technically, he's the president when it happens. But just know, people did it to support him because he's about to be inaugurated. Also want to point out, while Santa Anna signed the treaty saying that Texas was independent, the Mexican, like Congress, if you will, legislative branch, said we're not going to acknowledge that. So there will be tension, even though Texas is annexed and stuff. The Mexican government does not like it. They said that shouldn't have been allowed. Okay. Any questions? All right. So I'm going to show you a quick little clip. It's corny, but you know, I feel like it's Monday. So we will watch this little clip and then get into new stuff. And just remember, Democrats tend to be all about expanding, and Whigs tend to be about the American system, and they're actually mixed on expanding, because like the conscience Whigs wouldn't want to expand because they don't want slavery to expand. The Cotton Whigs would love to expand because they want slavery. There's Sam Houston, first president. Here we go. We're going to watch a couple of minutes here just to lighten the...
Welcome back, class. I'm Mr. Betts, and this is Meme Street, in which we examine an important historical event using the internet's greatest resource, meme videos and other funny clips. Today's topic, Texas independence and the Mexican-American War. So it's the early 1800s, and Texas is still a part of Mexico, which is actually still a part of Spain. Problem is, no one lives there. So in order to promote growth, the Spanish government starts offering huge tracts of land to empresarios, or people that would bring settlers in. The American Moses Austin saw this as a great deal because, hey, it's free real estate. Two problems though. Moses dies and Mexico becomes an independent country. But Moses' son, Stephen Austin, gets the okay from the new Mexican government to start a colony and brings in 300 families. Now yeah, there are rules that these settlers have to abide by, like learn Spanish, become Mexican citizens, become Catholics. Still not the weirdest rules I've ever heard of.
No pomegranates! No pomegranates! Say it.
The Texans really didn't follow the rules anyway. Now, Mexico had made this offer to the entire world, but it was pretty much just Americans that were coming in, and in greater numbers. So in 1830, the Mexican government officially shut down all immigration from the United States into Mexico. This sounds weirdly familiar to me.
Really strong. Number one, I'm building a wall. They're not coming in anymore. Number two, immediately we're building a wall.
And the Texans were mad. There were already rumblings for independence, and this just made things worse. Trade with the U.S. plummeted. Texans couldn't even get their family members over, but you know what? If you don't like the rules,
then maybe you shouldn't be living here!
Well, that's easily fixed.
So Stephen Austin meets with General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna to discuss maybe making Texas its own state, and is immediately shut down. He sends word back to Texas that maybe we should start planning for an independence movement, but is arrested when that message is somehow intercepted.
And they were roommates.
Oh my God, they were roommates.
To make matters worse, Santa Anna declares himself dictator of Mexico and throws out the Mexican Constitution. Austin gets out of jail, but at this point he is convinced war is unavoidable.
Tina, you're kind of headed toward the only other car in the lot. You have plenty of time to turn, Tina, so just go ahead. Turn one way or the other. You're just swerving back and forth. Turn one way and stick with it, Tina. Tina, for the love of God, turn away or stop! The brakes, Tina, on the left, you're about to hit that car! The brakes! Hit the brakes! Oh my God, it's bad.
By October 1835, Santa Anna had sent soldiers into Texas to put down any rebels. And the first actual fight takes place in the town of Gonzales, where the Mexican soldiers were supposed to take a Texas-held cannon. The Texans mockingly adorned it with a flag that said, "Come and take it." So after that, Texans, calling on a diverse group of volunteers, defeated a much larger Mexican force in San Antonio. But the following year, Santa Anna and his men surrounded a small group of Texans in the San Antonio-based mission called the Alamo. And they were in a real pickle because while they did have cannons, they had no gunpowder. Wait, did they check the basement?
There's no basement at the Alamo.
12 days went by while heroes like William Travis, Davy Crockett, and Jim Bowie fought off onslaught after onslaught. Finally, the Mexican cannons blew through the wall and the Texans were no match for their overpowering attack. And while all of this was going on, Texan leaders were meeting in the town of Washington on the Brazos, where they drafted a new constitution and declared independence on March 2nd. The Republic of Texas is born.
Hey, Patrick, what am I now?
Stupid?
No, I'm Texas.
I think I lost my Texan audience with that one. Sam Houston was chosen to lead, and one of his first decisions was to have his troops retreat from their position in Goliad to go protect more important forts. Unfortunately, while retreating, they were captured by the Mexicans and executed in what's called the Goliad Massacre. Not a great start for the new country.
Are you okay, honey?
But things would turn around quickly the next month in April in San Juancito, where Houston and an army of about 900 would surprise attack 1,300 Mexicans led by Santa Anna, screaming, "Remember the Alamo! Remember Goliad!"
I remember when, I remember.
And the Texans would defeat the Mexicans and capture Santa Anna, who would sign a treaty on May 14, 1836 that recognized Texas as a free and independent country, which apparently they didn't want to be because they would ask the U.S. to annex them a few months later. And President Jackson said nope, as this would upset that whole free and slave state balance, and effectively Texas was left out in the cold.
La 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 la, la 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 la.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
By 1845, though, Manifest Destiny was all the rave. America, under newly elected President James K. Polk, wanted Texas and Oregon and basically everything. So Texas is annexed in 45, but there's just so much land west to it. I mean, there's California and New Mexico. Yeah, this was basically our foreign policy in the 1840s.
Excuse me? I need all the Subway cookies. I need all the Subway cookies.
And Mexico owned like all of that land. If only.
All right, so we're going to do a little bit of lecture. We'll knock out the rest of chapter 13. Let's see. All right, so just remember that all of Oregon is in green right there, okay? And remember, we will jointly occupy it with England. But when Polk is president, he is going to want to change some things, okay? So we are on the Oregon country. Remember, we want all the way up to the 54th parallel, which would be up here at the top green stuff, okay? So now, let's go to the election of 1844. The election of 1844, the main topic is expansion. That's, the blank, okay? And, it's what do we want to do, that kind of stuff. And it's Henry Clay is going to be the Whig, Okay, this is probably the best chance Henry Clay has to actually winning the election. Okay, here's the problem though. It's all about expansion. It's all about should we annex Texas? Okay, and it has everything to do with slavery. Remember, Jackson delayed it. He was like, I'm not going to make that decision because this could open up a new can of worms. Okay, now with the Democrats, so again, the Whigs nominate Henry Clay. Okay, for the Democrats, at the Democratic nominating convention, there are actually 2 Democrats. One was John C. Calhoun, and like there is a stalemate basically, like a deadlock. Like people aren't giving in, and you know what I'm saying? Like some people are like, over my dead body, I'm going to choose that person. Everybody going to choose that person. A third option needs to happen. Does that make sense? And someone says, what about Polk? And they're like, who the heck is Polk? Okay, so the blank is dark horse. If you're a dark horse candidate, it means that like nationally, there are people who don't know that person exists. Okay, and then people start to research. Oh, he was a protege of Andrew Jackson. He was from Tennessee. His nickname is Young Hickory instead of Old Hickory. And they're like, huh. And he's very, he wants to expand. He's all about manifest destiny. And so because those 2 people were deadlocked, they look at another person, James Knox Polk from Tennessee. Okay, his campaign slogan will be 5440 or fight. And that refers to Oregon. Remember, we want the 42nd all the way up to 5440. So he basically saying is, look, we want all of Oregon or we'll fight for it. That, I mean, think about it. He knows what he wants. And if that's his slogan, you know, he's all about some manifest destiny. Okay. Let's see. There's also, so it's definitely like, what about Oregon and what about Texas? And he's like, remember, he's all about annexing Texas. Okay. You have another party, the Liberty Party, which we have talked about. Okay. Remember, a Liberty Party is all about they're an abolitionist group. Okay. So let's talk about how, yes, I will starting now, Emma, I will. Okay. So that's the Liberty Party. Let's talk about the reason why Clay loses. Okay. Because I told you, he's the front runner for everyone. When it comes to annexing Texas, Clay says no. Okay. Well, closer and closer to November 1844, the election, okay, he'll flip-flop, meaning he says, oh no, we will annex it. Okay. So when a politician flip-flops, some people lose respect already because it's like you just flip-flopped your idea, okay? But remember I told you how there's 2 types of Whigs at this time? You have your cotton Whigs who love slavery and want to expand slavery. You also have your conscience Whigs, like they don't like slavery and they're hesitant to expand, okay? Think about this though. When he said no, when he flip-flopped and said, yes, I'll allow Texas, I want Texas to be annexed, he pissed off the conscience Whigs. Right? Does that make sense? And those conscience Whigs said, I can't vote for this guy anymore. And instead, they'll vote for the Liberty Party, who's against slavery. And that was just enough to make sure, you know, that's how Polk got the majority of electoral votes and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so there's that. Now let's talk about Polk and, you know, Oregon and all that kind of stuff. The thing is, if there's one president who's like the manifest destiny president, it's James K. Polk. Okay, he said, I'm only going to run for 1 term. I'm only going to serve, you know, 4 years. He worked so hard that the White House actually established lanterns so he could work into the night. Okay, and the land we get from Polk being president is basically all this white stuff. We get Polk. 4 years. Okay, a lot of historians, and I tend to agree with this statement, say that Polk is probably one of the most underrated presidents. You always hear about Lincoln and FDR and Kennedy. Look at this. Like, 4 years, we get all that white land. It's pretty impressive. Okay. So there he is, and he does have a pretty sweet mullet. The only guy to really have that degree of a mullet, that style. So if you ever see someone who looks like that in like a cartoon or something, it's probably going to be Polk. Okay, so with Oregon, what does he do? When he is giving his inaugural address, he refers to his plan for Oregon as the whole or none, meaning I want all the way up to the 5440. If I have to fight, I will, and then we might lose all of it, but I'm going to get all of it. You get what I'm saying? But he'll actually propose that we eventually settle for the 49th parallel. Okay, so that 49th is that blank there. Okay, and you're probably thinking, and that's going to be called the Treaty of Oregon. That so that, I mean, that's one. I feel like that's like the first treaty that's like that has an easy name. Okay, and you're thinking, is he a hypocrite? Like he was saying 5440 or fight. I want the whole or none. And then he's the one who proposes to England that we settle for the 49th. It's all about the context. Okay. At this time, he knew he'd probably go to war with Mexico. And wouldn't it be extremely foolish to have two wars at the same time? Okay. So he said, I got to settle somewhere. Remember, he's a Southern slave owner. He's going to want to fight for Mexican land because that most likely be slave land, right? And he'll settle for Oregon, the northern land that probably wouldn't have slaves. So he will settle for Oregon at the 49th parallel, which is where we'll get Puget Sound and stuff, which is a great port. Okay, so we settled here. Instead of all this, we settle basically about halfway. All right. So now we are on the last page, and if this, if you have the notes, do y'all have this cartoon? If y'all don't, okay, don't worry about it if you have that cartoon, but don't worry about it. Okay, so now let's talk about the Mexican-American War. I'll tell you this right now, you must know the dates. You know, I don't explicitly tell you, like, we know 1763 is a date you need to know, 1807, Embargo Act you need to know, Louisiana Purchase, 1803. Mexican-American War, you better know those dates, for 1846 to 1848, the 2-year war. Okay, let's talk about causes. Remember, I told you the whole Texas, like, annexation, independence and annexation is awkward because, like, the Mexican government, like the legislature and stuff, like, doesn't agree. Like, they're just not recognizing that Texas is part of America. Like, they're bitter. Does that make sense? We also have some problems with, we don't trust the Mexican government after, like, the massacres at the Alamo and Goliad. It's left a bitter taste in our mouth. Okay. I would put a star next to letter C, a border dispute, or like boundary border dispute. One of those is fine. And if you look right here, okay, there were two rivers that one river we wanted to be, you know, the boundary, and the other, Mexico wanted to be the boundary. Okay. Up here you have the Nueces River. Okay. That is what Mexico claimed as the boundary. However, America claimed that it was the Rio Grande River. Okay, so this land right here says disputed territory. Mexico thinks it's theirs. We think it's ours. It's awkward. And usually when there's a war, it's about boundaries. Okay, so there's that. So again, Mexico claimed the Nueces River. We claim the Rio Grande River. Okay, now, I'm going to skip to letter E first. There's a guy named John Slidell. Okay? Because of that awkward disputed territory, we actually send a diplomat, John Slidell, to go meet with the Mexican government. And we go there to strike a deal to offer to pay for that disputed land. Like, you know, we're not going to war, like, we're actually offering to, like, buy the land, okay? The Mexican government refuses to even meet with him. So you see, like, Americans are like, what the heck, Mexico? Like, we just want to agree to, like, make an offer, and you wouldn't even take the time to meet with our guide, and left another bitter taste. Okay, so now let's go to letter D. Okay, Polk senses, okay, we tried to buy it, that didn't happen, so we're probably gonna have to fight for it. Okay, so but again, do we want to pull the trigger and start the war? No, we got to provoke Mexico. So what Polk will do is he will, as commander-in-chief, he will order General Zachary Taylor to go south of Nueces River. It's a little bit south of Nueces River. And we're talking it's not just one person, Zachary Taylor. It's troops too. Just want to clarify, okay? And you'll see eventually things that are going to happen. Eventually, Polk will order Zachary Taylor's men to go south more, and we're at like right at the Rio Grande River. You see that the Mexican government, how they view it is there are U.S. troops on our soil. Do you see how some people think that we provoked this war because there is disputed territory and our soldiers were there? Okay, and so Polk is going, like I told you, Polk will order Taylor's men to go south and south and south, right when they're on the American border. But remember, Mexico thinks that's their land too. Okay, and there's a border incident. Okay, and it's called the Thornton Affair. You ever hear that? Okay, it happened April 26, 1846. Okay, and basically the Mexican military will pull the trigger. Okay, but again, from their perspective, it looked like the U.S. soldiers were invading their land. Okay, well, so now there are some American soldiers who have been killed. And James K. Polk goes and gives a speech to Congress, and he says, American blood has been shed on American soil. When you hear something like that, let's go to war, right? We've been attacked on our own land. But do you see what's sketchy about that? Was it our soil? Probably. Some people, if you're American, you'd say yes. But if you're Mexican, you're like, no, that was our soil. Okay? So there's actually, there are some people who were like, this had to have been provoked. This is something set. An interesting fact, Polk had already written the Declaration of War speech, except that little part right there, prior to this Thornton Affair. So he was ready for war. He was just waiting for the Mexican government to shoot first. Okay? And basically when they're voting to declare war, there's a group of conscience Whigs who are like, I think we're being very, very war hungry right here. And I think it's just a plot to fight so we can win more slave land. I think we need to spend money and do a study before we declare war to see if American blood was actually shed on American soil. Okay, and the guy who really led that was Abraham Lincoln. Okay, and that's going to be called the spot resolutions because they want to know the exact spot where American blood was shed. Okay, and he is a conscience Whig. So it's like conscience is how you spell it. And again, I mean, I think he was right, but like people aren't going to spend the money and time to see. It's like, hey, we're going to fight. Okay. But this just shows you that people don't even agree with this war. They think that this was a setup to get more slave land. Okay. And what I was going to say, I don't remember. Okay. So now let's talk about this. Who is the head guy, the head general? That's going to be Zachary Taylor. Okay. And because of his huge success with the Mexican-American War, he'll become an instant war hero. So much so that, you know, the Whigs will run him in 1848 and he will win. He never voted in his life. I have more political experience than he does. Okay. But if you're a war hero, you're good. Think Andrew Jackson, George Washington, Zachary Taylor. Okay. But he will be the head general. Okay. And he's going to go, you know, south of the Rio Grande. He will go and fight Santa Anna, remember that dictator of Mexico at Buena Vista. Okay. Let's go to the next side. California is a part of Mexico at this time, and they're actually already revolting. Okay. And there's a U.S. military guy named John C. Fremont. Okay, he goes to California and helps those people living there basically revolt against the Mexican government. And they will be successful in California thanks to Fremont and his men. And they will call California the Bear Flag Republic. That's why they have a bear flag today. That's their state flag. Okay. Then near the end, you have an, I would say he's like second in command. You have General Winfield Scott. Okay. He will go to Veracruz, Mexico, and then he will also capture Mexico City, which represents like the end of the war. With Winfield Scott, you'll have people like William Sherman, Ulysses Grant, and Robert E. Lee. They all fought together under Winfield Scott. So a lot of your big like Civil War generals had experience under Winfield Scott in the Mexican-American War. A little interesting fact there. Okay. And you'll watch a video in a second that kind of goes over the stuff. And then there's, so I just want to recap. There's only a couple of people. You don't really have to know the battles, okay? But note that, you know, Zachary Taylor is like the head general. We got that, right, in the Mexican-American War, okay? His, like, another great general, but not the head general, will be Winfield Scott, who's really responsible for, like, the end of the war. He captures Mexico City. Got it? Who's the California guy? Yeah, John C. Fremont, which he'll run for president one day, so you'll see him again. And Winfield Scott and Taylor, okay? And then there's one more guy you need to know, and his name is Stephen Kearney, okay? And he, it's on the front side if you just want to, like, circle. And he's also, oh, letter C, too. Just circle his name. He's like the assistant. He goes and helps Winfield Scott. He goes and helps Zachary Taylor. In California, he helps Fremont. He's kind of like he's wherever as needed. Okay. So once Winfield Scott's men capture Mexico City, the war is basically over, but we need to have a piece of paper signed by both, you know, parties. So we need a treaty. If I were you, I would circle the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. That is the name of the treaty. Make sure you know it. Okay. And first thing is that Mexico does have to acknowledge that Texas is independent and thus part of America now. Okay. What's going to be the border between Mexico and America now? What river? Rio Grande or Rio Grande. Good. And all that land on your outline, though I call it, it's like the darker land, okay, that Mexico lost 55% of its country with this war, okay? Now it makes more sense, okay, let's like go more present day-ish. What was that like thing that was sent that like really got us mad at Germany and we get involved in World War I? Zimmerman telegram, okay? This makes a little more sense now. Remember how Germany said, hey, Mexico, if you basically declare war on America or invade America, we'll help you get the land back that you lost. Now you know. What land did they lose? We're talking about the Mexican-American War land. 55% of their country they lost because they lost the war. Okay? And in parentheses, you need to know there is a proper noun that represents all the land Mexico lost. Okay? And I'll type it really quick and then I'll write it. It's called the Mexican Cession, but with a C. The root word here is like seed. When you seed something, you give up something. So the Mexican Cession is what Mexico had to give up, and it was 55% of its country. So I mean, you know, that. So now it might make a little more sense with that background information for the Zimmerman note or telegram. Okay. Now we do offer. We don't just take it because then they might be bitter. Okay. We say, look, we're going to give you $15 million, and we're going to purchase all this land from you. Okay. Okay, here's the thing. Polk, he's a big expansionist, and he's like, I mean, 55% is pretty good from Mexico, but I could get all of it if I wanted to, right? He decides to settle there at 55% of Mexico, the Mexican cession of this treaty, because he knows it's already going to reinvigorate that whole like debate over slavery and stuff. And he was like, we'll leave it at that, okay, to kind of hope, you know, it won't cost too much, but he'll be wrong, okay? Next, I got to talk about something. Letter L. Okay. It's called the Wilmot Proviso, and I'll show it to you for people who were. There you go. Okay. Proviso means proposal. Okay. There is a senator, Mr. David Wilmot from Pennsylvania, House of Representatives. He makes a proposal, and let me just clarify. He proposes this during the declare war debate. So we haven't even declared war yet, and he makes a proposal. And basically what it says is, if we fight Mexico and win, let's go ahead and say slavery will be banned in land Mexico gives us. The reason why the Wilmot Proviso is important in terms of U.S. history, it makes you realize that just of the thought of going to war where we could win a lot of land, what is the first thing on people's minds? Slavery. Will slavery expand or not? Because again, we haven't even declared war yet. And someone goes, let's go ahead and add this in the declaration of war. Okay? It lets you know. So imagine when we do get the land, how much sectionalism and tension and debates will be happening. Okay? What's going to happen, though, is that this will pass in the House of Representatives. And y'all know, in order for a bill to become a law, where does it go next? The Senate, right? When it gets to the Senate, it does not pass. So proposal, it's just a proposal. Nothing ever happens to it. But the reason why it's important, it proves that slavery, that debate over slavery is definitely going to happen. Just at the thought of war. Okay, so banned or prohibited, and the result is going to really reignite the sectional debate over slavery. Okay. The Mexican-American War is a huge, it would be like a top 3 reason for the Civil War. People don't realize it. It's so important. It's kind of like how the French-Indian War led to a war debt, which led to all the taxes and tension. Okay. This war led to a lot of land, and that led to all the debates over slavery. Because remember, prior to this war, what was the rule? Missouri Compromise, 36-30. Okay. Now, though, we get so much land, it's like, okay, what are the new rules? And that's where the debates, okay? And, basically less than 12 years after we get this land, we're fighting. We're seceding and all that, okay? So we have 2 more topics. Let's finish this up, okay? We have the election of 1848. Zachary Taylor is the Whig, okay? He wins. No political, experience. Letter B is the Democrat. His name is Lewis Cass. Lewis Cass. Okay? Now, he proposes something, and I want y'all to circle it. You see where it says popular sovereignty? Okay. When I talk about popular sovereignty, like in a civics class, that means that, the people are supreme, right? When I talk about popular sovereignty in chapter 13 and chapter 14, what that means is a different context. It's more specific. It means that citizens of a certain territory vote to determine what? What are we debating about? So remember, once you get 60,000 people, you can apply to be a state, right? And you draft a state constitution, and then the Congress would approve of it or not. Okay? This does not get started yet, but he's the guy who proposes it. And he says, when it comes to slavery, why don't let the people rule? Why don't let the people in that territory vote to determine if slavery will expand or not? Fair enough, let the people rule. It works if people don't cheat. Okay? And just want to point out, popular sovereignty is a pro-slavery doctrine. You're thinking, how could it be like that? At this time, what's the rule? I know that's a really bad America. It looks like a tooth. Don't judge. Okay? 3630, right? That's the rule, right? Now we get all this land. And technically it's like, I guess 3630 is still a thing. Well, what if your territory's right here? You shouldn't have slavery, right? Okay? What it is saying, though, is that no, under popular sovereignty, Lewis Cass' idea, you let the people who live here decide. And so you see, they now can decide if they want to have slavery, which would be a pro-slavery doctrine. Okay, please make sure you know that it's not just the people rule. We're talking 13 and 14.
What's that guy's name?
Lewis Cass, Lewis. Okay, and again, it's popular sovereignty. There will be another political party at this time. It's not going to be the Liberty Party. Okay, there'll be a group of Democrats who realize that they don't like slavery. Not all Democrats. Mainly Southern Democrats like slavery, but there's also Northern Democrats. Okay, Northern Democrats tended not to like slavery. Okay, they're going to like break away from the Democrats. And they were called the barn burners, because they were like radical because they didn't like slavery. And they're going to form a third party called the Free Soil Party. Okay, and there it is right there. If you're a free soil, it does not mean you're an abolitionist. It basically means you're going to pick your battles. You're okay with slavery existing where it is, but this new soil from Mexico, we don't want it to spread there. So like, okay, Georgia, you can have your slaves, but like California, no, we're not going to let you spread. This new soil is going to be free. Okay, and that will be enough also to get some Democrats not to vote for Lewis Cass. So that would like make Zachary Taylor's chances get bigger. And then the last thing here, we have the gold rush, okay? Technically, gold is discovered in 1848 at Sutter's Mill, which is right outside of San Francisco, okay? By the time people realize that there is gold, it's 1849. And so the people who migrated rather quickly to California to find more gold, they were referred to as the 49ers. That's like San Francisco 49ers, football team. It's Sutter's Mill is right there in San Francisco, basically. Okay. And I mean, we're talking 300,000 people migrated to California to find gold. Not just Americans, Latin Americans, Chinese. Okay. And like this is a big reason why the Chinese come to America, because of the gold. Okay. And, what's going to happen is they will actually get 60,000 people in a matter of weeks. So then California will apply to be a free state. And there are some Southerners who were like, over my dead body, because California is huge. And they don't want that to be a free state. And so they threatened to secede in 1850. Henry Clay has to step in and gives one more compromise before he dies. And that will be the first thing we talk about in chapter 14. So where we end chapter 13 is California wants to be a free state, and there are some Southerners who are pissed about it. Got it? Okay. I'm going to show you a 3-minute clip just about like overview of the war. You'll see I'm not really focusing too much on name of battles. It's more about causes, the impact, and maybe some key people. And then we'll do a gem kit based off of all of chapter 13. Got it? Any questions online, people? Sutters, Sutters. Okay.
After gaining independence from Spain in 1821, Mexico was in a chaotic state. The government and presidency were continuously changing hands, the economy was declining, and there were numerous rebellions. Then, in the 1830s, the Republic of Texas gained its independence from Mexico. However, the borders between the two nations were never agreed upon. Meanwhile, the Americans were aggressively pursuing their belief of manifest destiny. However, a treaty with the British stopped them from expanding north of Oregon, so they turned their attention south. In 1845, the Republic of Texas and its many American inhabitants happily agreed to join the Union, but the Mexicans turned down the United States' offer to buy Santa Fe de Nuevo Mexico, Alta California, and the disputed regions in Texas. American troops were then sent into the contested border regions, but a scouting party was attacked by Mexican troops, and that gave the Americans a reason to go to war. However, many American politicians still viewed it as an illegal invasion. They started the war by quickly driving the Mexicans across the Rio Grande and sending a fleet to attack port cities along California, which encouraged the already revolting Californians to fight for the Americans. The US forces were then divided into two. One, under the leadership of future President Zachary Taylor, went south and conquered Monterey, while another headed west, easily taking Santa Fe and eventually Los Angeles at the start of 1847. Revolts in Mexico City halted a counterattack and allowed Zachary Taylor's army to seize Buena Vista. However, President Polk grew suspicious of Taylor's political ambitions, so sent another army to take Veracruz. This army had the likes of Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee, Ulysses S. Grant, and Matthew Perry in its ranks. They moved from Veracruz to Mexico City, fighting off all the Mexican attempts to stop them, even though they were heavily outnumbered. They moved into Mexico City in September 1847. Santa Anna, the Mexican president, fled the city, and a peace treaty was signed in early 1848, surrendering all the Mexican land above the modern-day border to the United States, except for a small part of southern Arizona and New Mexico, but that was bought later in 1853. The newly acquired land was the new frontier in America, the Wild West. The regions became even more influential after the Californian gold rush in the 1850s. On the downside, however, the new territory created a lot of tension, as no one could agree whether slavery would be allowed in them or not. The Compromise of 1850 was a result of these disagreements, and the whole debate was one of the causes behind the US Civil War.
So you see, we straight to the point. Let's do a gym kit. I've heard like 7 minutes is a good time, not too long, not too short. Does that seem, that 7 minutes okay?